Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of Classic Rock Revisited, where we look at classic rock albums that I think are essential or might top my list as far as my favorites. And last week we talked about Tusk, Fleetwood Mac's double album, and their follow up to Rumors. And for this week we got a very special album we're looking at, one of my favorite ones of all time, and that's Abbey Road. The Beatles' last album that they recorded in a studio, and their second to last album that was released before Let It Be. So today we got a Beatles connoisseur joining me today, and it's Mark Rowlands.
I think connoisseur may be a little generous, but yeah,
Well,
I love
fan.
me some Beatles.
I gotta hype you up, man. Gotta get ready for this. So we're talking about Abbey Road, which is, or where would this rank for you as far as your favorite albums, Mark?
Favorite albums of all time or favorite Beatles album?
Of the Beatles.
Number one, easily.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I listened to Sgt. Pepper's a ridiculous amount, and then once I was just about getting burnt out on that album, started listening to Abbey Road, got it on vinyl, and I've just been obsessed with it ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's a truly incredible feat of music, this album, in my opinion. I mean, it's one that I've listened to so many times. Honestly, when you told me that you wanted me on for the Abbey Road episode, I didn't even have to listen to the album again.
Yeah. I knew the first person I was going to on Abbey Road. I was like, co-host Ryan from last week, the one band that I think we just don't agree on is the Beatles, because he thinks they're slightly overrated, and I just think they're incredible, and so many great songs and so many great albums.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the discography speaks for itself, in my opinion, and I would venture to say the Beatles never put out a bad album, and I'd venture to say they never put out anything less than good. Even their worst albums are a good album. Their best albums are all
Even their boy band kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Early On and Hard Day's Night and all that. There's some real gems in there.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, so I'll just give some background on the album itself. So this was, like I mentioned before, second to last album to be released to the public, and it was released in 1969. But it was actually the last one they recorded in studio, and I think you can kind of see it with how the album's presented. It really feels like a culmination of everything that they've done throughout their career, and it does tie back to their roots a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the height of the dysfunction with the band after the White Album.
Yep.
And everybody was kind of hating each other still, but they decided to just stick it out and make one last record to finish off their careers. And what better way to start the album than Come Together, which is a song about them all uniting to join together and make one last great album. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on the opening track for Abbey Road?
I personally think Come Together is in the conversation for the best opening track of any album ever. I love this song. I think Harrison's guitar work in it is phenomenal. I think Paul McCartney really sets the tone with an excellent, unforgettable bass line. And I just love starting off the album with something like this. It really sets the tone for the rest of the album, in my opinion. Because it's kind of later Beatles, it's kind of earlier Beatles. It's a great song, and I think it's got one of the great hooks of all time.
Yeah, and I love how it feels like almost like a thesis statement for the album in a way, where it really like defines what the album's all about, and like what was going through the heads of all the band members at the time. One thing you mentioned that I actually had first on my notes here was the bass line from Paul McCartney is just incredible. Even from like the first few seconds of the song, anybody who listens to any like classic rock knows what's coming. And like you said, it feels like it's just the perfect amalgamation of everything that's come before in their career. because it feels like kind of has the vibe of their early music, but also the production and the guitar work and everything seems so advanced as far as their discography. And yeah, I just think it's a great way to kick off the album.
Yeah, and songs like this are where I think George Harrison is at his peak on guitar, because George Harrison was the king of melodic guitar playing. He's not going to go out and give you a ripping solo, or, he's not Eddie Van Halen. That's not what you expect out of George Harrison. What you expect is stuff like the solo you hear in this, where it's simple, it's to the point, and it's just perfect with the rest of the song. He doesn't try to
And it's
melt your
not
face.
flashy too.
Yeah, it's not flashy. It doesn't need to be. That was his style, and that's what made him so distinctive. And I think it shows perfectly in this song. I love the guitar solo for "Come Together" because it's like, I think total it's like 7 notes or something like that. It's just, it doesn't need to be flashy. It's not a flashy song, really. The song's got 3 chords in it, and it's pretty much a blues progression. It's just, it's an incredible song, and I love George Harrison's part in it, and I think the song as a whole, no one does even a mediocre job in this song. Everyone, including Ringo Starr, does a great job in this song.
Even Ringo Starr.
Even Ringo Starr.
I mean, that says something. So, I mean, while we're talking about George Harrison and his excellent contributions to the album, might as well jump into his first love song on the album, and that's "Something." So, what are your thoughts on the second track here on Abbey Road, Mark?
Well, no, there's a reason this is my favorite Beatles album. Something is so good, and I have a whole new appreciation for it nowadays, because a couple years ago I had the wonderful opportunity to see Sir Paul McCartney in concert.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
I'm so jealous.
He played the Carrier Dome here in Syracuse, New York, and he took out a ukulele, and without the help of the rest of his band, just on ukulele, he played Something. And it was incredible. It just, the entire place just nodding their heads back and forth, singing along to this timeless ballad. It's stuff like this where George Harrison doesn't get enough credit in terms of being a songwriter for this band. Obviously, Lennon and McCartney did a lot of the heavy lifting, but George Harrison could write a song with the best of them in this band, and I think this is proof.
Yeah, and I think the whole album just kind of shows how, I mean, he only has 2 huge songs on the album, but those are the biggest ones, biggest contributions, and the ones that people remember the most. And I could gush about Something forever. It's definitely in my top 5 of Beatles songs all time, and maybe the greatest love song of all time.
It's up there.
Definitely on the top 10 list there for sure. You know how much I love lists. And also one of my favorite lines from the song was, "You're asking me, will my love grow? I don't know. I don't know." It's so simple, but it's so like deep at the same time. You could kind of add your own experiences to it. Sort of in the way you can with "In My Life" from Rubber Soul.
Yeah.
Where whatever you've gone through and like whatever relationship has ended in an unsavory way, you can kind of add that experience to the music, and it totally enhances it.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about George Harrison too, and this isn't so much about Abbey Road as a whole, but about George Harrison as a person. When we were talking earlier and I recommended the album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs to you, by Derek and the Dominoes, Eric Clapton's band, Eric and George were best friends. Best friends in the world. They loved each other, and Eric did a great tribute to George at the concert for George, playing While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And the thing is that Layla is it's basically an album of love songs, every one of which were written about George Harrison's wife, Patty. Because Eric Clapton was in love with George Harrison's wife. And they later went on to be married, and Eric Clapton was a terrible husband to her. But it's just, it's stuff like that. George Harrison was always getting cucked by the rest of the Beatles. I mean, and by his best friend Eric Clapton, he was always getting screwed and never getting the spotlight when he should have. And I think that tragic story of him losing his wife to his best friend is also sort of, it shows the type of struggles he faced being in this mega star group, the Beatles, where Lennon and McCartney got all the attention, but George Harrison comes out with something like something, and it blows your mind how good it is.
Yeah, and also I, like you were saying, about how he just kind of got the short end of the stick, as far as his songwriting career. It's no secret why he made such a massive album after he left the Beatles, and why he formed the super band, the Traveling Wilburys. I mean, he just had so many ideas and so many great songs that were just kind of pushed off to the side.
Yeah.
And I believe he barely got While My Guitar Gently Weeps on the White Album in general.
Well, yeah, and the only reason, one of the main reasons I got on the album is because he called up Eric Clapton and said, "Hey, do you want to play guitar on this?" That's Eric Clapton playing the lead guitar part on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It's not George Harrison.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he was able to get Clapton on there, at that time, being with, he had done work with Cream, and, he was just starting Derek and the Dominoes, and he was huge, and so they can't take off a song from the album that has Eric Clapton on it, Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of why it got on the album in the first place.
Yeah, now look at how much of an influence that song has had. Just whenever they actually let him do his own thing, he got such great results. And with that being said, now we're going to have a bizarre tonal shift. The first one of this album, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Maxwell's Silverhammer. So Maxwell's Silverhammer is probably the most upbeat, catchy song about murder ever.
Yeah.
I don't know how many songs are in that competition. But yeah, this is just one of the most bizarre songs you're going to find on the album. But maybe one of my favorites.
I love this song. I always have.
It's so like catchy and peppy and fun and upbeat. And then like you actually like look at the lyrics and it's just a total contradiction of that.
Bang bang Maxwell's silver hammer. It
came down upon his head.
This is an awesome song. I don't care what anyone says. It's not one of my favorite songs off the album. That's just how deep this album is. But
yeah,
I don't know. I've liked this song since I was a kid, man. Like,
and that's what I love about it, because I feel like there's a couple songs off of Tusk that kind of fell under this this like subcategory of songs, but it's just the lyrics wildly contradict the content.
Yeah.
Because if you're listening to the song and you're like 8 years old, you're not going to know what it's about. You're just listening to it and you hear all the exciting bells and whistles and Paul McCartney's voice, and you think it's like the most fun thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you revisit it years later and you're like, man, this is kind of morbid and dark.
Yeah, so I meant to tell this story earlier. I forgot. This is the first album I ever bought. Abbey Road.
Nice.
I bought it on CD when I was about 12 years old. And it was this and Hotel California, actually, were the two albums I bought. The two CDs I bought.
Can't go wrong with either of those.
And I bought it because, I knew the Beatles, but I was 12 years old. I bought it for Here Comes the Sun and Come Together, basically. And I sat down and I listened to the album. And for a couple years, Maxwell's Silver Hammer was my favorite song on this album. I mean, I really liked this song for a long time because there's something about, I don't know why, I love the piano work that McCartney does.
Oh yeah, same here.
I think the piano, it's very old-timey, like, almost like a player piano in a saloon in like the 1870s. it sounds like, it's got that very almost off-key tone, which I think
Mm-hmm.
really fits with the song, and I've always been a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the piano style. I remember I was looking up the song itself on Wikipedia this last week. The most reputable source
Hmm.
for anything music related
Of
or
course.
just anything, right? Yeah. So apparently every single person in the band hated this song.
Yeah, they all hated it.
Um, yeah, John Lennon called it granny music.
Hmm.
And Harrison said sometimes Paul would make us do these really fruity songs. I mean, Maxwell Silverhammer was so fruity. And then Ringo Starr said it was the worst track they ever had to record, and it went on for weeks, and he thought it was awful. So, I mean, kudos to Paul McCartney for fighting for the song to be on the album, because, I mean, when I listen to Side A, I feel like it's almost essential, even though it feels so out of left field.
Here's my problem with Ringo saying that. Ringo, this sounds like every song you ever wrote. This
Exactly,
is a
yeah.
better Yellow Submarine.
No, I 100% agree.
So I don't get why Ringo would say that, because all of his songs sound like this, and Paul McCartney just did it better.
Maybe there's a bit of jealousy tied up in there.
Oh, probably.
Starting to sense that. Yeah.
McCartney was actually a good musician.
Shots fired.
I hate Ringo.
All right, on that note, we're going to go into another Paul McCartney track, and it's Oh Darling.
Oh, darling.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts on the fourth track here, Oh Darling?
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. This is also in my top 5 Beatles songs.
Interesting.
I love this song. I think McCartney's voice on it is perfect. The only thing I think could be better about this song, and as much as I love McCartney, now I have one problem with the Beatles, and that it's I think John Lennon is actually underutilized, in a sense that when does he ever sound like he did on Twist and Shout?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing.
Hardly ever.
With
Twist and
especially
Shout,
Abbey
John
Road.
Lennon is the best John Lennon. That's when his voice sounds the best, in my opinion. It's that raspy yell, that real rocker voice. If you throw that version of John Lennon on this song, this is an all-timer. This is considered to be one of the greatest Beatles songs ever, in my opinion. But
Oh yeah, and the harmonies too.
yeah, I think if you use that raspy John Lennon on this song, it becomes a top 5 song for every fan of the Beatles.
I think this is something interesting to note, because I was thinking the same thing about John Lennon's contributions to the album, because in many ways, Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road are both very much Paul McCartney's projects.
Yeah, this is Paul's album.
Yeah, and you can see kind of I mean, if you're talking even distribution of songs, you can see kind of more like 60% from Paul McCartney and then 40% from the rest of the band.
Mm-hmm.
But with Lennon, I believe he was in a car crash or was in a position where he couldn't perform for part of the album. And I'm curious if this was one of the reasons why he wasn't involved.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Because I know there's some tracks later, like Golden Slumbers, where John Lennon wasn't even in the studio.
Yeah. It's interesting because I just, I don't know. As much as I like John Lennon as a songwriter, and he did so many great songs, I think his singing talent was wasted. And
Yeah.
especially when he goes on into his solo career, which I don't like. I don't like John Lennon's solo stuff. I think it's preachy. I think it's boring. Imagine is not a good song.
But what about those celebrities singing it from their multi-million-dollar mansions? That didn't
awful.
emotionally affect you?
That was terrible. One of the worst videos I've ever seen.
I mean, it broke my heart seeing all those celebrities laying on their beautiful, expensive couches talking about imagining a world. different than what they're in right now. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, but anyway, like, I think I just I think John Lennon could have been used so much more on this album. Obviously, if he was in the car crash and all that stuff, that's different. If he was physically unable to contribute to the album, but on a whole, just I think him in "Oh Darling" would have been perfect. This is the perfect song for him to use that belt he has, like he uses in "Twist and Shout." I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many years between those two songs.
Yeah, but
Wonder if
his
something
voice
changed
could
along
still
the way.
do that. John Lennon's voice never left him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I actually didn't really consider them adding John Lennon to this track particularly, but just my quick thoughts on the song. I love, first of all, how it just sounds like such a classic Beatles song.
Yep.
Maybe something you'd find from around like 65, 66
Mm-hmm.
as far as their discography. But also you can tell how they're taking everything they learned throughout their careers and applying it to make the song sound more polished and professional. And one other note I'd like to say about the song is I absolutely love this, like, I guess you get kind of a trio of songs where Paul McCartney just completely unleashes vocally.
Yep.
And I love that kind of growl he has to his voice, and that kind of, there's so much like timbre, and he just sounds like it's like coming completely from like his heart and his gut. It's just like heavy rock and roll, which is just such a great fit after Maxwell Silverhammer, which is such a weird off-kilter song.
Yeah, and I do think Paul McCartney is phenomenal on this song. It's just, I feel like there's a little wasted potential.
What could have been.
And another thing, this is back-to-back songs. I love the piano in this song, too. I think it fits the song very well. I think McCartney is, like, he's not a piano player, per se. He was never trained in piano or anything like that. He taught himself. And
oh, interesting.
Yeah, he never, as far as I know, he never had any piano lessons. I think the only instrument he had some sort of lesson in was guitar. And then he was the third best guitar player in the Beatles. So he ended up playing bass.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he was an incredible bass player. But I think he does really good work in this. And I'm almost interested, I'm going to look this up. Was it McCartney on piano on this album, or was it Billy Preston?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Because Billy Preston did a lot of work with the Beatles. And if you don't know who Billy Preston is, the people listening, he's a very well-respected piano player and did a lot of session work, but he worked with the Beatles a lot. And so I'm interested to see if he was...
Oh, I just found it online on the BeatlesBible.com.
Mm-hmm.
Not a sponsor. He played on I Want You, She's So Heavy and something, but wasn't credited for it.
Okay, so yeah. But he was on the album, so he... Okay.
Yeah.
But, okay, then Paul did a great job.
Hey, kudos to Paul, yeah. So, now this is another track. I'm actually very curious what you think about this, since it's sung by who you would say to be the only incompetent Beatle, and that's Ringo Starr, and it's Octopus's Garden.
In an octopus's garden in the shade.
So, Octopus's Garden, is your Ringo bias going to get in the way here, or is this one that you enjoy?
I don't like it. It's
All right,
fine.
let's dive into that.
That's what I think of a lot of Ringo songs. I think a lot of them are fine. I think this song is fine.
If I could describe it in one word, I'd just say cute.
Yeah, it's cute. Exactly. That's what Ringo did. He wrote cute songs. Yellow Submarine is cute. Octopus's Garden is cute. It's just not good.
This is the kind of Beatles music that, I mean, man, when I was really young, I loved the Beatles, and there was two distinct types of Beatles songs that I liked throughout my life. So when I was like about 10, I absolutely loved like Here Comes the Sun, Octopus's Garden, Yellow Submarine, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, just to throw out a couple more names there. And then now I kind of lean towards their ballads and their piano-based songs, and maybe the ones that are more ambitious. But yeah, Octopus's Garden, I feel like it's a good way to kind of ease yourself into the Beatles music. It's one that, as a kid, I absolutely loved. But now doesn't quite hold up as well as I remember it. But with that being said, I've got to say the production on this song is pretty phenomenal.
Oh yeah, it's top notch.
The bass is really solid and sounds really good. I like how Ringo Starr's rich voice kind of adds to the song. And I wouldn't argue any other Beatles member singing this song. I feel like it's perfect for Ringo Starr. And even though it's not a perfect song, it was the best contribution that he could have given. And I feel like that was necessary for technically their last album that they put out.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I think this is a perfect Ringo song. But yeah, it's just not for me. I never got into the Ringo Beatles stuff. Even when I was a kid, I never thought it was, I never thought it was that great. And so stuff like this, it just doesn't do it for me. Never has.
For you, is it a skippable track, or is it one that you feel like you have to listen to within the context of the album?
Skippable.
Okay, I can definitely see that. We're getting to one, actually the next one, that I might think is a bit skippable, but for not the reason you might expect, and that's I Want You, She's So Heavy. So, with this song, this is the conclusion to side A of the album, and I've very mixed thoughts on it. I think it wraps up the first half of the album quite well, but I feel like it just kind of drags a little bit.
I can see that.
So, what are your general thoughts on the song?
I love this song. This is, in my opinion, musically the best song on side A.
Wow.
Looking at it from a pure musical perspective. It's not my favorite song on side A, but I think it's probably the best put together song on the first side of the album.
So the most impressive, kind of admirable contribution? Okay.
Just because it doesn't feel like it should be. It's simple. It's a simple song.
There's like nothing lyrically to dive into here.
But
it's just all about the instrumentals and the production.
Exactly. The production and the instrumental behind it. I think Harrison doubles the vocals excellently on this song. Because behind the vocals you can hear like just a little guitar thing that doubles everything. McCartney, right? Yeah. Everything McCartney does. And I really like this song a lot. I would never skip this song listening to Abbey Road.
Yeah, I don't think it's skippable in the sense where I would skip the song entirely, but it's a 7-minute track, and it is the kind of song where I'm at about 5 minutes and I get the gist. So I might just kind of fast forward past the last 2 minutes or so.
That's fair.
But on the positive side here, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff about this song. I like the dark and moody atmosphere. I guess it's kind of another song I could compare it to is Moodage Daydream.
Yes.
Where there's just kind of like a breakdown and you hear the roaring guitar and it's just, there's not even any vocals for a good chunk of it. So I think the atmosphere that the song creates is pretty impressive. And I mean, it's, like I mentioned, it's a 7-minute song, so it's an epic. I mean, it takes you on a whole journey. This is going to get us a little bit sidetracked here, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. What would you consider the best, like, epic song, like, kind of 7-minute, 8-minute ballad out of, like, any artist that you could think of?
Oh, boy.
Because I was having this conversation with my brother, and for me, it's probably Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, I mean, Stairway's certainly up there. I mean, there's a few that come to mind: Stairway, Bohemian Rhapsody,
Scenes from an Italian Restaurant is
Scenes
one.
from an Italian Restaurant. Yeah, that's actually one of the ones I was thinking of. Layla is up there as well. It's got the ripping guitar, the first half of it, and the second half with the slow piano and the Duane Allman slide playing. But for me personally, and this is it's a not really a deep cut pick, but it's what I think. When I think epic song, this is what I think of, and that's just because it's more of a jam, but it just goes forever and it goes up and down and all over the place. Is the Live at the Fillmore East version of Whipping Post by the Allman Brothers, and it's
That's a great
22
choice.
minutes long.
20. Wait, what?
22 minutes long.
Wow.
But Noah, the guitar in this song, there isn't a dull moment in the entire thing. You got the Whipping Post driving bass line by Barry Oakley, dun 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 dun, just the entire time, and the back and forth guitar playing by Dickie Betts and Duane Allman, and Greg Allman's such just a deep soul in his voice. It's just, when I think epic song, that's what I think of. But in terms of a studio recording, I'd probably throw Stairway at number one, with Freebird and Scenes from an Italian Restaurant and Bohemian Rhapsody in the conversation as well.
For sure. I'm kind of conflicted on, I mean, just the idea of an epic song, like an 8-minute track. I feel like it all depends on the placement in the album. Because I was listening to The Stranger, which is definitely an album that we're going to cover on this podcast eventually. And it just fits so perfectly on side A. And it basically wraps everything in a bow, even though it has such an epic scope to it, and it just keeps on going and going. You could also say the same for Bohemian Rhapsody. And for this song, I think it really, for I Want You, She's So Heavy, I think it really depends on like what kind of mood you're in.
That's
Because if I'm shuffling my music, if I'm shuffling my Beatles music, probably not going to listen to it all the way through. But I think it just adds to the experience of just listening to the album on vinyl. Like, I'm not about to like pull that needle up when I have a minute and a half left, you know what I mean? So that wraps up side A. So which would be your favorite track on side A for this album?
My favorite? Well, I know
You
for
said
a
that I
fact,
Want You, She's So Heavy is the most impressive.
Yeah. I know for a fact it's not Octopus's Garden.
Okay, so we have that one eliminated.
My favorite would probably be Oh Darling. Yeah, I would say Oh Darling.
That's a good choice.
But Come Together is so good as well. This entire album is so good. It's hard for me to pick a favorite, but Oh Darling is the one I'd go with.
I think for me, it's by far Something, as far as personal enjoyment. And also, I didn't even mention like just the groovy bass, and just it just feels like you're kind of being like enveloped into that world when you listen to it.
Yeah.
So that's probably my favorite track off side A. But I gotta say, the most impressive musically to me is Come Together.
That's fair. Yeah.
Just everything's so solid, and it's not flashy like you said. It's getting the job done, and it kind of like grabs your attention right away. So, with that being said, we're going to dive into side B of the album, and the first track that's on there is the most popular song from the album, and that's Here Comes the Sun.
Here comes the sun. Here comes.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts on Here Comes the Sun?
Incredible way to start side B. Here Comes the Sun
Totally
is so good. Harrison once again on the guitar, just with one of the best acoustic guitar parts of all time, in my opinion. Just when I think of iconic acoustic guitar intros, once again Stairway comes to mind, but this is probably number one that I think of.
definitely. And I think this is just, I don't even know if this is a great way to describe the song, but it's the most vibey on the album. It's the kind of song where you could be in the crappiest mood ever. You could have like the worst news just hit you and be in the worst place possible. And then you hear this song and it kind of turns you around. I love how unabashedly happy and joyful and exciting the song is. And I mean, there's a reason why it was in the B movie, right? Cinematic classic.
Of course.
Had to be chosen. Gotta say though, if they used the Beatles version in B movie, maybe it would go from a 9.5 to a 10 out of 10. Just throwing it out there.
I think it fits for the B movie, the one they use.
That's fair. That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, George Harrison contributing another huge hit off the album. Even though he was kind of held back musically, as far as his work on the Beatles. I mean, the two big songs that he contributed to the album were the two biggest hits. So, Here Comes the Sun, also a great, like you said, great way to start the second half of the album. And it's one of the two songs that doesn't fall under the big harmony, melody that we're gonna get into soon.
Yeah.
So that other song that I was referring to is the 8th track on the album, and that's the psychedelic track, Because.
Because the world is round.
So, man, this song falls under the category for me of songs that never get old. No matter how many times I've listened to the album, it's always such a showstopper for me. And even though I wouldn't really say it's like an S tier song or it's one of the best songs that they've put out, just the harmonies are so incredible, and I think it's a really, really solid song that kind of gets lost in the hits of the album, even though it was pretty popular. And I think it's just another excellent track to this album.
Yeah, I think this has the best vocals on the album. In terms of
And I believe it's the only song that all three of them sing together at the same time.
Yeah.
One of the few.
Yeah. So I like Because. I don't love it as much as you do. I do like it a lot, and like I said, I think it is the best vocally. This is the type of song I got to be in the right mood to listen to Because. That goes for all the Beatles songs that are sort of like this, the more psychedelic ones. I don't love those as much as I love some of their other stuff. It's still a very good song, and musically, it's very impressive. But yeah, I wouldn't skip it. I wouldn't skip this part of the medley or anything. It's just not one of my favorites on the album.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and it doesn't particularly fit the rest of the album perfectly, just because it seems like it's a little bit out of left field with how trippy and out there it is. But I gotta say, I think the bass work and some of the guitar riffs you hear in here fit really well with I Want You, She's So Heavy.
I agree.
So I think doing that kind of somewhat of a callback, just a couple songs after it, I think was the perfect placement you could have put it on the album.
Yeah, the guitar at the very beginning, the guitar intro is very much I Want You, She's So Heavy. With just the singular notes of the chord being plucked, and it is a good callback. And like I said, I like this song. It's just I've never considered it to be in the top tier of this album.
Yeah. I think I almost like it more in the context of the album than I do on its own.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if I'm like on Spotify and I click like shuffle, this is the Beatles, I'm not going to like drop everything and listen to Because. But I think just the way it's placed in the album's really smart and strategic, and is another reason why George Martin is God. So we have actually another song that we're going to see a callback to later on the album, and that's the ninth track on this album, You Never Give Me Your Money.
You never give me your money.
So, Mark, what are your thoughts on this track?
I really like this song.
It's grown on me quite a bit.
I've been a fan of this song for a long time. Same with, because I wouldn't put it in like the top tier of the album. But this is one that I enjoy quite a bit and I'll listen to on my own. There was actually a long time where I thought this was just a Paul McCartney song. I feel like it doesn't feel like a Beatles song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. It seems like his own project in a way.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Paul McCartney solo work song. And I think that's interesting because I feel like he took some inspiration from this song in his future work. More so than things like Oh Darling and stuff like that. I feel like this really laid the groundwork for what McCartney did later on in his career as a solo artist.
Yeah, and I think it's. I think the biggest strength of this song is actually how it's incorporated later on in the medley. It's almost like giving you a preview of what you're going to hear in the 3-song package near the end of the album. So it sets the groundwork very well with the piano solo.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I think it's really, really impressive how Paul McCartney, fluctuates vocally throughout the song. Because, I mean, you basically hear 3 different, types of voices from Paul. Because it's, 3 different songs. First, you start out with, kind of a smooth voice, and then you have, a more rough, Ringo Starr-like voice in the second chunk of the song. And then, obviously, another change in the third portion. So, it feels like Paul McCartney's just kind of flexing his musical muscles a little bit here. But I think it's a great track, and it's one that I probably listen to outside of the context of the album, just on my own, pretty often too.
Yeah, I think a lot of this album is Paul flexing his musical muscles, but I think he does it a lot vocally on this song. Like you said, the 3 different sections sort of showcasing each the different types of vocals he's capable of showcasing. And
Yeah, it almost feels like he's impersonating other members of the band at some point.
Kinda, yeah.
Because I feel like I hear a touch of George Harrison and definitely a Ringo Starr a little bit, and a little bit of Lennon. I mean, it just feels like he could do the whole album on his own. Obviously, it's better to have more people and more variety, but I feel like there could have been a version of Abbey Road that was more of a solo project.
I would have been fine with that, honestly.
Yeah.
It's just, this is his album in my opinion, and it always has been and always will be. And I think You Never Give Me Your Money is a really good song.
And following that, we have the 10th track, Sun King, and then this is kind of one of the few songs in the album that I don't really have a strong opinion on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with Sun
It
King.
exists. It's just there.
Yeah.
I do like the vibe of it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a callback to Because, as far as how the song feels. And I guess the only thing I really have to note about this song is I love how it ties back to Here Comes the Sun, starting with Here Comes the Sun, and then a pause, and then saying King, kind of going into the song. I don't know if that was an intentional choice. Probably was. But I just like how it's a nice little tidbit within the track.
Yeah, I think it's definitely intentional. I mean, yeah, I'm fine with the song. I like the instrumental of it. It's just like you said, I don't have a strong opinion on it. I'll listen to it. I might skip this if I'm listening to Abbey Road.
Yeah. I mean, if you're listening to it on vinyl or CD, I might not be as inclined to, but like I said before,
Yeah.
listening to it on Spotify
Yeah,
doesn't really feel essential.
no, I'm fine with it, but yeah.
So yeah, we might as well move on to the next track here. So following Sun King, we have the next part of the melody, and that's Mean Mr. Mustard. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this song, because I kind of have mixed feelings on it.
Very similar to Sun King. I don't have much of an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine. It's not even close to being the best song in the 1 minute range on this album.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I'll probably skip Sun King and Mean Mr. Mustard if I'm listening to it on Spotify, you know what I mean? I don't really need to hear those two songs while listening to this album.
Yeah, and especially having heard them before, it's just not always worth a revisit. I will say, though, I do like the groovy sound of it. And once again, I mean, this is just completely expected, but the production of the song is very, very good. All the instruments sound like distant enough, but still cohesive. And it's just one of the tracks on the album where I like it, but it's not something that I would seek out.
Yeah, I mean,
And then,
this is like the only little section where I think the album lacks.
yeah,
I think the rest of them are fantastic for the most part, and I think this group is just, it's sort of middling. It's sort of just middle of the road. I don't really care.
yeah,
It's kind of disappointing, like, because there is a phenomenal medley on this album.
yeah.
And they tried to put another one in, and I just don't think it works as well.
And everything around the album is so great that it just, even those songs being passively good, like, detracts from the experience a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably the reason why it's not my favorite overall album, and it just sits at number 2, because I feel like it's just a pinch away from just, I don't think that's Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, and the next track are really important to the context of the album. They could be cut out, and I probably would have the same opinion on the album.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go into the next track that I sort of mentioned there, and that's Polythene Pam. So Mark, is this where album takes a turn for the better for you, or is it another forgettable track?
It takes a turn for the better. I really like Polythene Pam.
Okay.
I will listen to this just on its own. I like the upbeat nature. I like the chord progression in it. It fits very well. I've always been a fan of this song, and I'm kind of upset that it's grouped together with the other two, because I would like to listen to this song as part of the medley, but I just think it's a lot better than the other two.
And this one particularly feels like their early work a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the guitar playing and the vocals. It just sounds like classic Beatles music right there.
It kind of reminds me of like a Paperback Writer.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely gives off the same energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very catchy track. I mean, listen to it a couple times and it'll be stuck in your head all week. And the guitar work, I think, is very impressive on this track. For me, it doesn't quite inject the album with as much energy as the next track, which kind of sets things into motion. And we might as well dive into She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. So for me, this is where everything comes together again, and it leads into the trio, which I'm very excited to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I love the transition from Polythene Pam into this song, and I love the transition into the next track we're going to talk about. And also just the harmonies are so good. And every single time I hear this song, just the prospect of where I know the album's going just gets me so excited and fired up.
Yeah, that's understandable. This is also in my top 5 favorite Beatles songs. I love She Came In Through the Bathroom Window.
It's so catchy.
This
It's a total earworm.
I could listen to this song on repeat. Just, oh my god. And I think this song is hurt by the fact that later on Joe Cocker did a version of it. And Joe Cocker famously couldn't write his own music, so he just did covers of other people's music. And usually he did them better, including With a Little Help from My Friends. If you haven't heard that, listen to it.
Okay.
It's specifically the version live at Woodstock. But he also did She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, and it is phenomenal. And I think that hurts this track a little bit when people look back on the album. This is such a good song. I mean, yeah, like you said, it gets in your head, but just the way it starts, just boom, she came in through, and like it's such a seemingly ridiculous
So much
premise.
energy.
But it's it's so much energy, and it really gets in your head, and I love this song so much.
Yeah, I love how it just, I guess that it starts in Polythene Pam, just kind of bringing a little bit more energy into the album, like getting things moving again, and then She Came In Through the Bathroom Window just absolutely barges in, and I mean, completely sets the tone for the rest of the album. And like you were saying, I feel like there were some great tiebacks, and it's just very impressive musically. And I feel like it almost ties into I Want You, She's So Heavy once again.
A little bit, yeah. The thing,
yeah, there's just like a little remnant.
Yeah, the thing I've always liked so much about this song is, like you said, it just bursts onto the scene like a girl coming in through the bathroom window.
Yeah, I mean,
Like, I think the start of this song is so perfect for the content. It's just, yeah, here's a song called She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. We are going to punch you in the face with the start of this song.
yeah,
And I think it works perfectly. I don't have any qualms with this song at all. I think it's a near perfect song.
and actually, an interesting point about this song is I purchased Abbey Road about December, January-ish this past year, and I didn't know the song existed. I'd heard most of the tracks in the album, but there were some ones on side B that I haven't really listened to before, and I was like, I read the title and I was like, what the hell is this song about? Like, where are we going here?
Yeah.
It's gonna be like one of John Lennon's somewhat creepy songs again, or like, where are we going here, guys? And then I heard it after like the mini melody that you hear before, and it's just, yeah, like you said, it's like a firecracker. It's just completely reinvigorates the album, and we keep on talking like this is such a, like the last couple songs were such a detractor from the album, but really
They're still good.
put it on any other album and it's iconic.
Yeah.
You know, it's just because it's the Beatles, I guess our expectations are a lot higher. So now, I mean, we're getting into the trio that I've been hyping up this entire episode, and that starts with Golden Slumbers. I'm so excited to talk about this song.
Golden slumbers.
All right, so I'm gonna go off. So I'm just gonna let you go first, and then head into my rant here.
All right, so this song, when I first bought Abbey Road as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, 12-year-old, I didn't really listen to it all the way through, like that intently, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was a song I had heard, but I never really cared about. Well, my freshman year of high school, I started dating this girl, and that's a story for a whole nother time, but
That's another podcast.
her favorite Beatles song was Golden Slumbers. And I was like, I don't really think I know that one. And I just remember her pulling it up on her phone And the two of us just laying down on my bed listening to Golden Slumbers. And ever since then, it's just been, oh my God, such an incredible song. Just everything about it is perfect. The piano and the vocals and its simplicity, but it's also so complicated at the same time in terms of, the vocal range required to sing it. And just, I have such fond memories of this song. And it's just one of those moments I know I'll never forget, was the first time really, truly listening to this song with her.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote. I have a less impressive story there, exciting story. I was in my room, and I was binging a bunch of videos on YouTube. It's probably like 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was watching a bunch of like top 10 lists because I love lists. And I stumbled across top 10 underrated Beatles songs.
Watch Mojo, I'm assuming?
I don't think it was Watch Mojo, actually. I was looking for a Watch Mojo video, and then I found some like smaller channel posted something. And I watched the video, and there were a bunch of songs I recognized, and a bunch of them I had no idea existed. And then I came across number one, and I heard like a 5-second clip of Paul McCartney just like roaring out the lyrics, like absolutely unleashing. And I was like, okay, I need to pull this up. So then I looked it up on YouTube, and I listened to it, and it was like a religious experience. Like, I will not forget the emotions and just how it felt listening to that song for the first time. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to talk about with it, but first of all, it's definitely a song that I don't think they could have done better in any aspect. Like, every single part of the song, every single lyric, chord, anything is just absolute perfection. And I love the contrast too, because you listen to the first 20 or so seconds of the song, and it kind of sounds like a lullaby.
Yeah, it does.
And you're kind of like drowsing off, and like your mind's going places and stuff, and all of a sudden it's just completely like takes a hold of you with the chorus. And man, I could talk about that song all day. It's just, Golden Slumbers is amazing, and definitely I think Paul McCartney's strongest vocal performance. I will say "Oh Darling" is maybe even more impressive because of how well he sustains all those notes.
Mm-hmm.
But Golden Slumbers, it doesn't last a second longer than it should have.
Yep.
And it fits so well in to carry that weight in the end, which are the next two tracks we're going to discuss. But yeah, man, Golden Slumbers. Wow.
Yeah, and the first time I really listened to it with her, and she was a musician as well. She was a guitar player, singer, fantastic singer.
Yeah.
And this is the first song where I was able to play it perfectly just after one listen. Like, I don't know what it was,
really?
but she was like, yeah, I want to play this with you. And I just picked up my guitar and played it. Like, the music, like, went through me when I listened to this song for the first time. It was like I was born to listen to this song. And it was an incredible experience for me. I'll never experience anything like that listening to music ever again. And I'll always have fond memories of this song, and it'll always be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Beatles song.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the more I talk about it, the more I'm going to end up repeating myself. So we'll go into the next track here.
Just quick question.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Sing?
The movie Sing? Oh, yes.
Jennifer Hudson does a great job with this song.
I haven't seen the movie in its entirety, but I did see that particular scene. And I looked for a full version, and it was so good, but I was like, I wish the production was better.
Yeah, the production.
Like, there was like that string. Like, the strings are one of the best parts of the song in the Beatles version, and I know it's a kids animated movie, so my expectations shouldn't be that high, but if they like tweaked it a little bit and like released it as a single,
mm-hmm.
I feel like it'd probably like get a lot of popularity.
Yeah, but I just want to shout her out because she did a great job with that song, and it's a really cool part of that movie.
Yeah, I need to watch the whole thing, but also I feel like that movie would probably bother me
I actually kind of like
just
it.
because.
I think it's pretty
Interesting.
good.
I've heard mixed stuff. I've heard some people say it's like basically The Voice, but in a movie form, so it feels like kind of a cash grab. But I've heard some people say it's like a great homage to different like musical styles and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I think of it. It's like, you get Elton John songs and Beatles and some newer stuff like Taylor Swift and uh, Seth MacFarlane sings "My Way" by Frank Sinatra, and it's awesome.
Oh, I didn't know that.
MacFarlane's a great singer. He loves Sinatra, and he plays the mouse character in the movie. And
And he has a great Christmas album.
oh, his Christmas album's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, he sings "My Way" by Frank Sinatra, and it's very good.
All right, maybe I should give that a listen and give that a watch as well. So once we got Golden Slumbers, we got the second part of the 3-part melody, and that's Carry That Weight. I can't think of many better transitions than Golden Slumbers to Carry That Weight. In any song I could think of. I mean, I love how the strings kind of hold together this melody. And there's that anthemic chorus that just kind of like, it feels like you're almost in like a church and you're hearing the gospel sing, or you're hearing the choir sing the gospel. It's just, I don't even know. Just great experience.
Yeah, it is. I agree. The transition from Golden Slumbers into Carry That Weight is phenomenal. And this is another part of when I saw McCartney live. This was just a surreal experience. That's how he ends his shows. He ends with Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, the end. And so I waited all night to hear it. I had heard every other song I wanted to hear. But just to hear that transition is just something that it takes your breath away.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you love the brass solo as well.
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and it's kind of like we're talking about with She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, where like just particular parts of the song just completely leap out. It's like, it feels like it's like grabbing a hold of you, kind of. And I feel like Carry That Weight, the brass section in the song, definitely falls under that category.
Yeah, I love the brass part of the song. I feel like it's something that the Beatles could have utilized more over the course of their careers, because I think it works perfectly in this song.
Yeah, and I remember reading something, probably on Wikipedia, so maybe I should fact check that. That the song "Got to Get You Into My Life" was a direct inspiration for the band Chicago.
Really?
Just because of how, I mean, they heard the song and kind of like dove into what they were doing more, because adding horns and rock and roll was pretty unprecedented at the time that they were starting, and then once they heard that song, apparently they were like, maybe we could make this a career. Maybe this is like a viable way to sustain our careers.
Yeah, look how that turned out.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely incredible. The scope of the Beatles' work. I mean, they could put out some random song that they just thought of in a dream, and then all of a sudden it's like a direct inspiration for like 20 different bands.
So Let It Be.
Yeah, exactly.
You just described Let It Be.
I just realized right after I said it. So, I mean, without further ado, let's get into the end. Which isn't the end of the album, but it's the end of this great melody we're talking
It
about.
should be the end of the album.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second here, but
Yeah.
What are your general thoughts on the end?
I think it's great. I'm a big fan of this medley. It's just, I think the end is the weakest part, because it's going up against Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali as the other two.
Uh-huh.
It's the weakest part of the medley, but it's still so good, and it's only because the other two are so great.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing at the end is, I can listen to Carry That Weight and Golden Slumbers on their own. You can't really do that with the end, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's an extension of both of those songs, for sure. I think it's kind of the glue of the album, though. Because you see so many callbacks to the rest of the album. And I didn't even mention that the You Never Give Me Your Money piano solo is also seen in this melody.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also just get little subtle tiebacks to all the other songs in the album. And it just it all comes together at the last second, and then the tension's completely cut by the very light piano solo that you hear at the end of the song.
Yeah.
And then singing the iconic line, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
The inspiration for one of the great SNL skits of all time.
I actually have been meaning to watch that, but I haven't yet.
The Chris Farley show with Paul McCartney. Dude,
I'm definitely adding. I just added that to my watch later right now.
It's so
just
funny.
Right when I heard it.
So when you said the love you make is equal to the love you take, is that true? It's just shit like that. It's super funny.
Yeah, I gotta give that a watch. I mean, I feel like every single time I have you on a podcast, there's just a bunch of bands and a bunch of videos and anything pop culture related that you bring up that I just had to feel embarrassed that I haven't heard of it or watched it.
I pay far too much attention to pop culture, so it's okay.
All right, that's good.
Specifically, old pop culture. I couldn't tell you anything about pop culture now. Pop culture from the 90s, dude. Oh, I'm all in it.
That's where we differ. Yeah, because I'm super behind on 80s, 90s, early 2000s pop culture, but I mean any trend today I could tell you about. So yeah, I mean that wraps up the 3-song melody. Absolutely incredible way to kind of wrap up the album. But then, right when you think everything's over and the record's gonna end, then Her Majesty comes in.
Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she doesn't have a lot to say.
And I feel like you kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'm guessing you're gonna say it's completely inconsequential.
It's pointless.
Yeah.
This song is pointless. I don't like it.
I have such mixed thoughts on it because I think it's good on its own, but I think that you could have shoved it in the middle of the side B part of the album. I feel like if you put it maybe before Mean Mr. Mustard, or before Sun King, it might fit a little bit better. Because, I mean, the end is such a glorious conclusion to the album. And then you just kind of get this little 1-minute anecdote, kind of like an epilogue of sorts.
It's 25 seconds, isn't it?
Actually, I gotta double check that.
I think it's 30 seconds max.
23 seconds.
Yeah, it's stupid. Take it out.
Yeah, I mean, you can, yeah, like I was saying a second ago, why not just put it in the middle of the album? Or just not put it on the album?
Whenever I listen to this album all the way through, I stop it after the end. I don't listen to Her Majesty.
Yeah, and I think I have a little anecdote to throw out here. I think the reason why it was included at the end of the album was because it might have been Paul McCartney who told the people who were producing the album to put that song at the end of the album because they didn't know how to integrate it with the rest of everything else. And by the end of it, they made a mistake and left it on at the end. And then the Beatles were like, oh, that's cool.
And it's not cool.
I will say, though, I do like I don't like the placement of the song, but it's still a nice little tune. I feel like it kind of falls into the category of what John Lennon would say to be granny music.
Yeah. I don't know.
So I guess he's right in that respect.
Yeah,
But
I never got Her Majesty. I never really cared for it. Like I said, I don't
guess it's
really
kind of a
listen to
way
it.
of them saying, like, we're not taking this any more seriously than you are.
Yeah.
But after the end, it just feels like kind of a contradiction.
Yeah.
When that could have, like, been the perfect ending to the album. Kind of like A Day in the Life was.
Exactly.
For Sgt. Pepper's.
Exactly. And I think it's a missed opportunity having this song on the album, honestly.
Yeah, I'm surprised you have such a strong opinion. I mean, I'm just kind of following the, whatever, that's cool, opinion here. But I totally get where you're coming from. It kind of threw me for the loop the first couple times I listened to it because I didn't know this song was on the album. Until once the end ends, there's like a maybe 30-second lull. So I would just take the needle off the record and call it a day. And then there's one time where I was like laying on the couch and it was playing in the background, and then I was like too lazy to go up and turn it off, and then I just ended up hearing it and I was like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
So
that just don't like it.
even though it's kind of an underwhelming way to end the album, let's just kind of dive into our general thoughts on the album, and I guess just kind of are the thematic things we see throughout the record.
Yeah.
So what would you say generally about this album? Like how does it all come together for you?
Well,
No pun intended.
The one thing nice one.
Thanks. Just trying to sneak that in there.
The one thing I really appreciate about this album is the musicianship and the fact that so many people get the spotlight, and it's just really amazing how they're all able to showcase their talents really in terms of how they play, not necessarily their vocals but just the amount of musicianship that goes into this album, and the fact that McCartney's playing multiple instruments, Harrison's showcasing different types of his guitar playing. There's even like in the ending medley, even Ringo gets a little moment. There's that little drum solo there. And
yeah,
that's not something
that's
we
pretty
saw
rare.
often. No, it's not bad. It's not something we saw out of him very often. So the fact that this was the last album they ever recorded, I think they knew it was going to be their last album. They said, you know what, we're all gonna have a little piece of this, a little piece of ourselves in this album. And I love this album so much. It's one of my favorite albums.
I completely agree with everything you said. I also love how, even though at this point everybody in the band despised each other, they still had that glimmer of a memory of when they were the Beatles and when they were bursting on the scene and they're all best friends with each other. And it feels like this album is kind of them like going back to their roots, going back to a place where everybody felt more calm, more at ease. And you could definitely tell through the results we get in this album. I mean, there's so many great contributions. There are some tracks where, like you mentioned with Oh Darling, where maybe you could have had a harmony instead of making it kind of like a solo song.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think overall this album like blends together so well. Even almost more so than Sgt. Pepper's, where like the transitions are so great, and as you're listening to it, it just feels like one complete experience rather than like a bunch of songs kind of like shoved together on the album. And I mean, I could see both sides of like the White Album, where you're just trying to get as much content out there as possible, but with Abbey Road, it just feels like so solid and so well made and well orchestrated, and everything just seemed to be firing on all cylinders. And I think this is definitely one of the most essential albums in rock history, and one of the most influential. You can even see it from just the cover art. of the album, them walking down Abbey Road. Just they're total trendsetters, and even though the Beatles aren't necessarily my favorite band, I do think that they're the most important and one that so many people would follow afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you keep bringing up Sgt. Pepper's, and honestly, I don't love Sgt. Pepper's as an album. I love the beginning of the album and I love the end of the album, but I don't really care about the middle. It, I just, I think Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a great way to start the album, going into With a Little Help from My Friends, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and Getting Better.
Yeah.
But then, I don't really love it until Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, going into A Day in the Life.
Yeah, I really love She's Leaving Home, and When I'm 64 is also a good tune. But like Good Morning, and Lovely Rita just kind of, it's kind of like that middle melody we see in this album, but it's just more of the album is comprised of that.
Yeah, I never really got the hype behind Sgt. Pepper's.
I mean, I love Sgt. Pepper's, but I totally get what you're saying. And I would generally agree with you, but I think that the highs are so high in that album, and that those tracks like Getting Better and Sgt. Pepper's and Day in the Life are so good that for me it's excusable that there's like 3 or 4 songs that fall under like kind of that skippable category for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point.
So I'm interested now that we're talking about their overall discography. What falls right behind Abbey Road for you as far as their work?
That's really tough for me to, like, that's really tough for me to, like, place, because a lot of their albums, I like 4 or 5, or I love 4 or 5 songs, and then the rest I'm sort of iffy on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm that way with Sgt. Pepper's, I'm that way with the White Album. I think
I've got to say, I really enjoy Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, okay.
I would probably say for me it goes Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper's, and then Magical Mystery Tour, and then the White Album. As far as like the top tier stuff.
If I had to pick one, God, this is tough. It'd probably be Please Please Me. Actually.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that, but I could see that for sure.
I love I Saw Her Standing There. Please Please Me is a great song. Love Me Do is a great song. Twist and Shout's phenomenal. P.S. I Love You is very good. Baby It's You is very good. So probably, yeah, Please Please Me would probably be my second favorite Beatles album.
Okay. I wasn't expecting that answer, but I like that pick. So, I mean, I guess that kind of wraps up our Beatles conversation. Thank you so much, Mark, for being on for this episode.
Yeah, my
where can
pleasure.
people find you on your other podcast? Just for the people who listen to this to know.
What was that?
I was wondering if you wanted to dive into your own podcasts real quick. Give it a plug.
Yeah, sure. My podcast, the C-Listers podcast. It's a podcast about movies. Noah's been on a couple of times. We're definitely not going to record an episode of that right now. Little tease for you folks at home.
It's a crossover event right now.
Yeah, it is. Every episode can be found on my website, which is the-c-listers.com. That's the letter C. I've put a few blogs up there as well. I haven't been on there a ton lately, but I'm going to be on there more now that I'm not working anymore and the school year's going to end. So, but yeah, check that out if you like movies.
Yeah, and I got to say, C-Listers podcast is probably the most fun I've ever had appearing on a podcast ever. So definitely check that out if you guys like movies as well. And as far as this podcast, we'll probably see Mark again here. Probably in a Chicago episode coming up. A little tease there. And then next episode, actually, we got Born in the USA. Bruce Springsteen's, I guess, one of his two most essential albums to listen to, I think. So me and Ryan from week 1 on the Tusk episode, we'll be breaking that down, and then we have a lot more classic albums to cover in the future. So see you guys later.